one of the main reasons I brought you on is because I want to talk about your experience working on Naruto Shippuden. How was it playing a villain?
Yeah. So when I was hired, I only auditioned for the silly part of Tobi, right? So
Okay.
I came in and I knew that it was this clownish character who wore a funny orange mask. That's all I knew. Then we were doing a video game, and the video games, have the story version, and so the full story is revealed.
Yep.
And the mask came off of Tobi, and it was like, even though that hadn't even been me the moment before, but I was like, oh no. So I guess I'm done then, right? And they were like, yeah. And I was so bummed. The next line in the script said Tobi/Obito. And I was like kind of messing around, and I was, I just started doing this sort of darker sound. And the engineer was like, could you keep doing that? Is that a comfortable voice for you? Could you do that? And I was like, yeah. So he had me do a few lines of it, told me to take a break. I came back from the break, and he was like, okay, I ran it by everybody. You're gonna play the adult Obito. And that turned out to be like another 5 years of work after that, which is like amazing, totally crazy. And also, like, almost, if you think about it too hard, it drives you nuts, because it's like, that's not how it's supposed to work. But there you go.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy, Raysean, from the Raysean Gadson Anime Podcast, or RGAP for short. And on today's episode, we're interviewing special guest MICHAEL YURCHAK, a professional voice actor who is known for Naruto Shippuden, Sonic at the Olympic Games, and The Legend of Korra. Join us as we dive into the world of voice acting, exploring MICHAEL's personal journey and achievements, uncovering his anime origin story, and also discussing our top favorite Naruto supervillains. We'll also share tips for anyone out there trying to get into voice acting. If that sounds interesting to you, then sit back, enjoy the ride, and don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen.
Yeah, the back of the carpet has more words of wisdom. It says, this was invented to allow Babylonians to travel all over the world to gather treasure. Some things never change, huh? But enough of this friendly banter, Sonic. You better make sure you're ready when we meet face to face once again. You bet. I don't believe it!
Kidding.
It's just as I expected. Later. That expression. Am I perspiring? No. It's just the rain. These fools could never make me sweat.
Before we get started, I just want to allow my guest the opportunity to introduce himself, basically tell everybody what you do, where you're from, and also tell us your top 2 favorite Naruto villains.
I like that. My name is MICHAEL YURCHAK. I'm a voice actor. I live in Los Angeles, Pasadena, to be specific. I have done a lot of voice acting in my day, but the big thing that people tend to recognize me for is Naruto Shippuden, and I play both the silly side of Tobi and the adult Obito Uchiha, and a bunch of other smaller characters, but those are the 2 biggies. My favorite 2 Naruto villains would be Madara, who I share a soul with for part of my run there, when Tobi is changes "What? I don't believe it!" Kidding to "It's just as I expected," which is not me, by the way. That is the Madara. That's actually the actor that plays Madara that drops into that deep dungeon of a voice there.
Okay, that's interesting.
My voice is deep too when the mask comes off, and it is adult Obito. But when it sounds like Madara, it's Madara. So yes, Neil Kaplan is the mastermind behind all of that, and he is both a good friend of mine and my favorite Naruto villain. And then I think my second favorite would have to be Pain. his whole arc. It's short but sweet, and it's just brutal, and I love him because it's like that part of the show is when it grows up. You know, the whole show to me becomes different after that. So I'm into it.
For sure. I'll have to go with you on Pain. Also, Naruto, I think he's an amazing villain. That's the only villain that literally, to me, made you really see things from both perspectives. From the point of view of like, okay, you know, we want the heroes to win and we know they're doing it for the good, but we don't, it's also those things outskirts that we don't think about that get affected by a lot of different things from like wars and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So basically seeing the perspective from Pain when he's basically like, okay, I understand y'all want to protect y'all families and stuff, but what about mine? And when he hit that line, that always just made me think like, you know, that's so interesting. Like you never really think about that in that perspective. So
yeah, totally.
I think Pain is amazing. For my next one, I had to choose the only villain I think ever really kept that vibe as being a villain. I know he kind of changes at the end, but I feel like Orochimaru always just gonna personify a villain. Like the way he looks, how he comes off, the creepy features about him and everything. I just feel like he's always gonna be a villain no matter what. But he'll always go down as my favorite villain. I think low key he was one of the biggest terrors to in the Naruto world when he was the main guy. So yeah, I have to choose Orochimaru.
All right, I accept.
Before we jump in, I wanted to just jump in back into what you were saying. I didn't realize that was Madara who was the deep voice Obito. I know when they were in that run, he was basically pretending to be Obito. So I always thought that was like his version of Madara's voice. But now that you say it, they do sound really similar.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, that's crazy. Okay.
And then when the mask comes off, you know, I go deep, but I don't go that deep, right? So I'm gonna be look at me. There's nothing in my heart. I don't feel pain any longer. You know, so that's me, and it stays me for the whole time that he's unmasked. But when he's got the mask on and he's going deep, that's Madara.
Oh man, I feel like it's almost two versions of the characters because you get to see him fight the same characters in both forms, and I feel like when he had the mask on, he seemed like a little bit more powerful. I don't know why, but
because I think he's drawing from Obito's power. I think Madara is drawing from Obito's power. To me, they're combined there, and who's really in control of whom? You know what I mean? So it's like in my head, there's like Madara has nursed Obito back to health, and is kind of is sort of in the driver's seat, but is starting to lose it. And eventually Obito's able to break free again and kind of find his way back out. So it's like the line is getting blurrier and blurrier as those episodes progress. This is my own interpretation of it. But you know, and then by the time Madara starts to lose, I think when the fighting starts to get rough, is Madara is losing his grip and Obito is coming out. And then when sort of the mask comes off, Obito shows up in full. Madara's kicked to the side for a bit, and now suddenly it's like he's full power and look out. You know,
I see what you're saying.
That's my idea.
So you said when he was basically under the mask, he was still under the Madara persona. So basically Madara was still taking over. So once the mask came off, he was able to actually be Obito. Yeah. Okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah. That's a good perspective. I've never heard that, but I think that's a good way of putting that.
Well, it is. I mean, you know that it's like, you know, they're linked, right? There's that one scene, especially where there's like an umbilical cord between them. Yeah. And Obito says, you know, like you thought you had me, you thought you were controlling me, but now we're the same. We're the, you know, it's both of us, you know. So there are those moments. Those are long scenes of like lots of exposition and lots of like long monologues. So that's what I did for so long. So it was like, I'm thinking of it through the lens of what I said on that day, and I'm always going to interpret it as I'm the star of the show. You know?
Because I mean, even when Obito wasn't Obito and just Tobi, he still seemed like he was the star of the show. You know what I mean?
It was fun, yeah, man, yeah.
But before we get into all the questions and everything, I just want to ask you, what have you been recently watching or listening to recently that you want to recommend?
So on the TV front, in terms of anime, I will do a little shameless plug here. I recently did a couple series, one called TP Bon and one called Rising Impact. These are both anime shows, but they are Rising Impact is a golf show. You might not think it's cool, but like that might not jump out at you as being like the thing you want to watch, but I'm telling you, it's pretty sweet. And TP Bon is like a time travel show, and it's like sort of random, but kind of awesome. They're both pretty deep cuts, but I dig them. I'm also liking Jujutsu Kaisen. Is everybody loves that show, and I guess I'm in the pack now. Live action though, I love this show called The Righteous Gemstones, which is it's on HBO Max. It's funny. This comedian Danny McBride is the sort of the creator of it, and this guy is to me, he's just the funniest guy on earth. So I've been watching a lot of that. Those are my top hits lately.
That's funny you bring up Danny McBride. I feel like I was just doing a research on scary movies. I think he helped bring back the last iteration of the Halloween movies. Like he was produce some of those.
Is that right? I didn't know that, but I believe you. Yeah, that's cool.
I thought that was interesting to see that. So for stuff that I've been just watching recently, I've talked about this in a few podcasts. I just recently got done with the Harry Potter franchise. I will say it lives up. I think the movies are pretty good. I will say I know there are people who like the books and say they're dead for. I'm just saying I never read the books. The movies hold up. For anime wise, I just rewatched Solo Leveling. Solo Leveling is nice. I love the action in it. I don't know if you gotten a chance to watch it, but I know you said you like Jujutsu Kaisen.
Yeah,
I feel like if you like Jujutsu Kaisen, you will most likely like this too. They're pretty they're pretty much a lot similar, but I think Jujutsu Kaisen, not Jujutsu Kaisen, but Solo Leveling, the animation is a little bit better.
Cool. All right, I'm in.
We gotta definitely check that out. For movies wise, I just what was it? The Woman in Black. I just watched that recently. I've been watching a lot of horror movies. I just watched some Halloween movies today recently. And I can't remember exactly what the name of this scary movie I just watched. It was just on, I think Hulu. It was called Sick, maybe. And it was basically kind of like the same thing as the Scream movies, where you have someone dresses up like a killer and he's going around killing people, and then you kind of get those like exposition dumps from different people, kind of like they're in the movie but not in the movie. So it was very interesting. I liked it. It was something newer, so that was pretty cool.
Cool.
But let's go ahead and jump into our interview. For my first question, I want to ask you is basically, what inspired you to do what? No, let me do that again. But my first question I want to ask you is, what inspired you to pursue a career in acting, and what was the major driving force behind that decision?
Well, let's see. So I grew up doing some kind of performance theater and so on, choir, that kind of thing from a very young age. I sort of lost it for a little while, although I did some plays in high school, and then I got involved in college doing sketch comedy and some theater as well, and it was so, I don't know, I just loved it so much, and I was also it was the one. I was giving so much time to it, but it felt effortless, and I was kind of, you'd spend all weekend at the theater. You'd spend all night, working on sets and memorizing lines and rehearsing, but it felt like a fun activity, but I realized I was working harder at that than I was at anything else. And right around that time, I had some friends who had graduated from the same school before me, and were making a run at it in New York, and they were doing it, so I figured, why can't I? And so I finished school and moved out to LA, and and did my best to kind of cobble together a way to pay the rent, waiting tables and that kind of stuff. And then taking classes, doing plays, getting some other stuff. And eventually I started doing commercials, making some money doing that. And kind of the rest is history. I've just kind of done it ever since I've been an adult. But I've been doing something like it for almost forever. The notion of doing it for a living was always sort of like a really strange and hard goal to kind of maintain and have bring to fruition. And there are some days still where it feels like it just feels like, what have I got myself into? But now I'm kind of in too deep, so so there's no turning back.
I feel you on that. So was it the transition, like, was it hard to go from like live acting to voice acting?
Voice acting. For me, it wasn't. For me, it was actually, the thing is, like, live acting is fun and I still do it. But I will say that people told me, because again, I've been doing a lot of comedy work and a lot of character stuff. And people had told me that I should get into doing voiceover, and it hadn't occurred to me before. I didn't know enough about the entertainment industry to even know or understand that there was such a thing as doing voiceover work. So when I found out about it, I really dove in, and it clicked for me very quickly. So I took a class. The teacher said she thought I should keep doing it. She helped me put a demo together, introduced me to an agency. The agent signed me right away. I had an audition, and this it's really more luck than anything. The first thing I auditioned for was a huge commercial campaign, and I got it. And what that meant was I was doing 2 or 3 professional sessions a week for like a year. Making enough money to kind of support myself and practicing at the highest level again and again and again, doing all these things. So I did, I don't know, 20 or 30 television spots and 20 or 30, or 50 or 60 radio spots and like all kinds of stuff. So it was like working and working and working. And so I really, really learned how to do it that way. And then things just have kind of gone on since then. To be honest, I've never had a gig as sweet as that one was. That was my first one, and it was also, that was at the very end of what was kind of like considered the golden age of commercials, where television commercials and radio commercials were abundant and people were making a lot of money, and it was just sort of like this amazing time to be, if you were booking to be an actor. That has changed quite a bit. There's less money, things are done cheaper. The cable stations have kind of taken over and dominate more so than the major networks do now. Advertising on those is very different. The pay rate is very different. So it's harder to do it now. But that for me was not only, it was the first time that I was really like just officially making a living was the second I started trying voiceover. But then also it just kind of, because of how much work I got right away, I really learned how to do it in a way that you couldn't pay to learn. You couldn't get someone to teach you that way, because I was, in the booth doing it for real right out of the gate. And that's again, as I say, I'm not naive enough to think that's because I was so special and excellent. I just think I was literally in the right place at the right time and just kind of hit it, swung hard on the first one and I got it. It's just kind of the way it went.
Is that your preferred learning method though? Because I know a lot of people like to actually just jump in and actually do it, than actually being taught through like computers and like someone telling you. So what do you think?
I think it's a great question. I think that in the end, I think there's nothing that's going to get it in your own bones like doing it. I do think, for me anyway, there is I like to know a theory. I like to know sort of like a general practice. I like to know the sort of the tips and a framework of what's going on and how I might approach something, like, a process as it's laid out. And then ultimately the only way that I can synthesize that with my own experience is to do it. So it's, it's like, but I do think there is a little theory underneath this stuff. There's a little technique underneath this stuff. And then there's a lot of inspiration and personality underneath this stuff. What I say, I do a lot of teaching as well now.
Mm-hmm.
And what I always tell my students is technique is there for the days that inspiration isn't. In other words, like if you see the character and you just feel them, get out of your own way and let it flow, But just like every other profession, there are days when you wake up and you don't feel like, making the donuts, right? And so on those days, it's nice to have a process that you can rely on in terms of these are the steps I need to take to get this character going. These are the things I can recognize. This is the way I can use my voice. This is the way I can interpret a script. This is the way I can, present some work vocally and physically. And knowing that that's there, eventually something catches fire and you find your inspiration and then you let it flow again. But there are days when it's not there, or there are days when you're looking at something and you don't know what to make of it, and those days, I'm real glad that I've got technique underneath me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since you brought it up, one of my questions was basically, what made you want to become a teacher? And was that something you always wanted to do?
Forgive me for this because, but see that cute dog back there?
Okay.
He really wants to go outside. So I'm going to let him out. Get out of here. And then I'm going to come back. You can see that I'm wearing my running gear also. So that now you just saw my lower body. That's what a voice actor's lower body looks like. I went back. So that same gig that I was telling you about, actually, this is funny. The first big commercial thing that I got from on my very first one, that was really swinging, and it was going. So it went on for about a year and a half. During that time, I was also booking all kinds of other work, and it was just like, I have arrived. This is excellent, unbelievable. I've made it. I can't believe it. I'm so happy. There was a strike. The Screen Actors Guild had a commercial strike right at that time, and everything went away. Everything.
Wow.
That I was doing at that time. So I mean, I had like 4 different big campaigns happening. I was doing on-camera stuff. I was doing lots of voiceover stuff. It all went away. And before I knew it, I was bartending again, and that's fine. But I was just sort of like, I ran into a moment of really wondering what I was, because I didn't necessarily feel. My parents, who are very academic in nature, were very academic in nature. They're both professors. Said, well, why don't you do some theater? And I thought, I don't even know if I'm qualified for that. I had studied it in college, but I hadn't done it in a while, and I was just sort of like, and I didn't really feel like on the inside of the theater can be a very daunting thing, because there is like, it's kind of theater nerds are their own kind of snobby, or so I thought, and so I just kind of had this thing of like, I don't know, what am I? Am I an artist? Am I a professional? Am I an actor? Am I, what am I? And I just thought I'd go. I wasn't sure, but I finally decided maybe I need to go back to school. So I went to graduate school, and while I was there, I was asked to teach a class as part of my program. And I loved it. And I loved it because I thought it was so exciting to sort of be talking about stuff that I was exploring, but also needing to articulate for students what I do or what I interpreted the book we were reading, how I interpreted it, and why I thought it was applicable to the work that we'd be doing. And there was something about that was just really satisfying, where it was like, I'm doing this for real. I'm doing voiceovers, and I'm doing on camera, and I've done a lot of work, and I've done a couple of movies by then and some TV shows and so on. And so I was like, I'm doing this, and there's more to learn, and I'm having a good time learning it. And I'm I something about you asked, how do I learn stuff? I think I partly learn by uh interpreting and then giving it back. You know what I mean? If I can articulate it, then suddenly it feels like I can really do it. If I'm just reading it, I don't totally get it. If I'm just doing it, that feels good, but it's also maybe not totally grounded. But if I can interpret it, do it, and then think about what worked and why, and say that to you clearly, I think I've got it. And that became real clear to me quickly, and I loved it, and so I kept doing it, and I've just kind of done it ever since. So I've been teaching in one way or another since about 2004. Which is
Yeah, the way you just said that, it's kind of like you get to the point where you actually master your craft, when you're actually able to teach somebody else what you're doing, because that's a hard skill within itself. Because at my job, I'm was supposed to like train people, but I realized that I'm just not a good trainer, like to be able to communicate what we need to do for people to understand, because it just doesn't work. And I respect that that's a skill that I need to work on, and that some people have it and some people don't.
And it's also, though, I mean, don't be too hard on yourself. Some of the best actors I know have no interest in teaching, and also don't want to, demystify for themselves what it is they do. It's like they don't even want to look underneath their own kimono. You know what I mean? It's like, so they're like, I do my thing, I feel it, I love it, and I don't want to dissect it too much, because that will somehow make it feel less authentic. And I dig that too, and teaching isn't for everybody. I do think it's its own sort of art form, because I grew up, as I said, both my parents taught, and my wife is a teacher, and I don't know, I've just kind of grown up around it. It fit naturally for me, and honestly, also it's it's a nice way to supplement an artist's income when that's necessary. It's not always necessary, but when it is, it sure does feel good to have something that's there that feels also connected to the art form. Because I teach at the college level, and I teach the actual craft of acting. I've taught some other things along the way too, but it's I can, I eat, sleep, and breathe voice acting and acting at this point. It's kind of everything I do. So that feels good to me. It feels like those are my credentials that kind of make me official. And for better or for worse, I always had a little bit of imposter syndrome. So that kind of helps me feel like, okay, this is my ID card.
But see, I'm one of those people who feel like it's good to actually be taught by somebody that's actively still doing what you want to do. You know what I mean? Because it makes you feel like they're actually giving you information that can be used now. A lot of times people give you information that could be a little bit outdated, but that's the information that they know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That's a great point. And is part of my story too, because the thing is, when I was in school, I had really smart people who were really great teachers and had done a lot of theater before. They weren't practicing anymore for the most part. And even if they were, even the practicing that they were doing was all specific to theater. I knew I wanted to do something different, and I didn't have access to people who were doing it. I like teaching now because I tell all my students, listen, I audition every day. I have gigs, 3, 4, 10 times a month. I travel to conventions a couple times a month. I'm out there grinding, just like you all will be if you're not already. And I'm never going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. There are sometimes we'll do what I do now fast, and right now I have a process that I go through quickly, and I use it, efficiently. We'll deconstruct that a little bit and probably do it a little bit slower. We'll kind of take the radio apart and look to see what makes it work. But I'm never going to ask you to do something that isn't going to be effective in the end. And I also respect and understand that not everything I tell you or not everything I share with you is going to be something you want to hold on to. And that's absolutely fine. Like in the end, I want you to be able to, walk away with something that feels authentic and useful for your process. And if I can be a little push in the right direction for that, I think I've done my job. And then in the meantime, let me give you a bunch of stuff to look at and think about, and use it all to kind of inform the choices you end up making for yourself.
Yeah, because that's true. Because one thing I've noticed just by doing a lot of these voice actor interviews is that the field of acting there's just no one way to get into it.
That's
There's
right.
so many
At all.
different routes, so many different people. It can be networking. It can just be you literally was at the mall and someone saw you. You know what I mean? It's just so many
Yeah.
different things that can happen. So I
Yeah.
always try to tell people, best thing you can do is just you got to prepare.
Yeah.
Preparation meets opportunity when it comes. You know what I mean? So I think that's the best route to do.
Yeah. That's all. I agree completely. Hamlet says it also.
But my next question I want to ask you is, what do you find most challenging about being a voice actor?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, lately, what's most challenging is, I'm sitting right here outside my booth, right? This is my booth. This is my little recording booth right there.
Okay.
I spend a lot of time in there, and I love it. But one of the things that is challenging in this day and age is, so the industry has changed quite a bit not just since COVID, but before COVID, and then COVID really knocked it into something where everybody records from home now. Technology has gotten so good and easy and cheap, and voice acting in general has gotten so sort of like popular in terms of animation and anime specifically, and video games and so on. Everybody kind of knows now what there is out there. That voice acting is a thing. And so what has happened is that the number of people trying to voice act has expanded, exponentially, hundreds of times. That's good in a way, because it opens up the field to people who might not otherwise have had access. So I'm for that. But for the old guys who have been doing it for a while, suddenly the market's it's saturated. There's a lot of people,
a lot of competition.
A lot of competition, and then it's more just like there's a lot of noise, because in the end of the day, at the end of the day, you can't buy the experience that some of us have gained over the last, however many years. And I think that kind of helps and ends up speaking for itself. But there's a lot of stuff out there. And what is hard is doing audition, and this is true for all artists anywhere. It's really hard to be doing work you think is pretty good and have it sort of disappear. And that's true. That's true for auditions. That's true for shows. I mean, the shows I mentioned earlier, it's like those shows dropped on Netflix. There was a big splash, and then they just, I haven't heard a thing about them since, and it's sort of like this funny thing where stuff happens, and then it goes away. There's so much content out there. There's so many actors out there. There's so much happening out there. This is all good in some ways, and I totally believe and get that. But as someone, as an artist, what can be so satisfying is you do the work for the love of the work, and then when you see that it has made a difference for somebody else, it really, really, really is fulfilling. It feels great, and it kind of fills my sails anyway, and makes me want to keep doing it. I think the hardest part is doing stuff, sending it out into the ether, and then never hearing anything back again. That's more true about auditions than it is about gigs, but it's true for gigs too. You do them and you think maybe this will be the one, and then it goes away. That's hard. Rejection is hard, of course, but rejection doesn't usually come like in a direct way. It's not like we do something and someone then says like, no, you're not good enough. Like that isn't the way it happens. It just disappears. You send it out there and it disappears. And then you're left wondering, because you're like, I thought that was pretty good. Like, where did I go wrong? What could I be doing differently? And so doubting yourself is, I think, that is maybe what this is boiling down to.
Mm-hmm.
Finding a way to fight the doubt, because it's the only business where you lose 99 times out of 100 and you're still considered a winner.
Yeah.
It's like if you were playing baseball and you were you were batting, like less than 100,
You'd be out of there.
you'd be cut. You'd cut from the team. If you were in business and you were and 1 in 100 or 99 out of 100 deals were going south, you'd go out of business. But actors, we just eat it up. We just take a beating and love it. So that's the hard part. It's just like it's an endurance game. Continuing your own belief in what you're doing, and that you deserve to do it. And that you have to do it.
Just to expand on one thing that you said that I thought was interesting, basically, content basically not really having a long shelf life because we got so much content coming out every year, or even just every season of anime coming out. At some point, it seemed like almost everything is getting almost like a cult-like type of fan base, where just so many people, and then every once in a while you might get those rare animes that can actually get big and be like a big anime that everybody can't wait to come see every year type of thing. But it's very rare now, and that the fact that you bring that up, I think that's interesting. But also the fact that also it helps bring in a lot of more actors and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
So
no, it really does. And that's the thing is, right, like, I'm someone who believes in the common good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really do believe that in the long run this is better. I also, though, I am an individual, and so I feel the pinch a little bit, and so both things are true at once. It's hard for me sometimes. It's probably better for everyone in the end.
My next question would be: do you think the talent of voice acting is rising, or you think it's lowering?
I don't think the talent is lowering. I think that more people doing it probably makes it possible for some projects to make some mistakes in casting. And I'm not talking about any one project in particular, and I'm certainly not talking about any actors in particular. I'm just saying, like, it is possible for something to get through the system without necessarily having top tier talent in it. But at the same time, it's such a trick to get something done that whoever did it, bless them, because it's just so hard. So I don't think so. There's a difference between union work and non-union work, or people, that's the sort of the theory anyway, is that if you've been around long enough and or kind of paid your dues literally and figuratively for long enough, you're in the union. And so union actors are meant to be at a certain level. They're, theoretically, these are the professionals. Non-union actors, they can be and are very, very excellent sometimes, and that travels all the way down to amateur, and so where are those lines? Impossible to say. And who actually gets to do the gigs? Impossible. Well, that's up to the production, and new talent gets discovered all the time, and and there it is. But I wouldn't say at all that talent is getting worse. I do think that it's just there's so much of it that you may hear stuff that you're less fond of. What do you think about that? Actually, that's a good question. Like, what from the side of like someone who watches the stuff, is there any vibe at all that performances are going down?
From my perspective, I will say, well, let me say this first. I didn't really pay attention to voice acting, like the voices. Like, I knew there were people who played those voices, but I more or less just watched the shows until I started really doing these interviews and stuff and started really paying attention to the voices behind these characters. And now I feel like I'm getting to the point where I can listen to certain animes and I can be like, I heard this is the same person from this anime, this is the same person from this anime. But I will say, from my perspective, I feel like nowadays I feel like you're starting to know the voice actor more more now with the character than you used to before.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's just because of social media and more people are interested. And now you got voice actors now posting a lot of their characters and stuff like that. They're like doing lives and stuff. But I feel like now you know a little bit more who play these characters than like back in the day. And then I will also go with the fact that I've noticed when I've done a lot of interviews with Naruto characters, like voice actors for the characters, a lot of them didn't even do cons and stuff until like after the during the pandemic. So there was like all those years, like they didn't really do anything, and I was kind of surprised. Like, why didn't really a lot of you do any? A lot of them just didn't realize that it was as popular as it was, and that really surprised me because I was like, wow, I didn't think. And then I guess when the pandemic happened, and then people really needed something to watch, it really just made those numbers go up and made people realize, well, this is actually very popular. Because I've done talked to the voice actor for Shikamaru and Neji and stuff, and they've both had the same type of thing. Similar thing.
Those guys are both good friends of mine too, Steve and Tom. And so I'm in that boat. I had no idea how popular it was. I knew that it was getting popular right before COVID. Somebody came to my house dressed as Tobi for Halloween, and I was like, I played that guy, and that was exciting. But that was maybe that was like 2016 or something like that, maybe a little earlier than that. But and then I had seen T-shirts and things and posters and so on. But like I still didn't know. I didn't totally get it, and then. I had not ever been invited to do a convention. I wasn't really into, but so the thing is, it's, I think that, I didn't know how to be invited. I didn't know, like, I think you sort of need either an agent or you need to reach out to conventions. And I didn't know how to do that. I figured if I was important enough, someone would come for me, and they never did. So it was like, okay, I guess I'm just not. And that's like, I can accept that. And I still like doing it. And, I'll just do what I do. After COVID, like right at the end of 2020, an agency reached out to me and said, hey, listen, we know your work. And if we could get you some appearances at conventions, would you be interested? And I said, I would be, but I don't know that I'm the guy, like I'm not sure because it's never happened before. And they were like, we think you might be one of the guys, and it was like, okay. And so I was like, let's try it. And we did. And it was awesome. And it was just such an unbelievable thing. And I think that, like Netflix redropped it, Hulu dropped it all during COVID, and it re-exploded. And so there's like multi-generational fans, with like grandfathers and fathers and sons and mothers and daughters. And and it's just like, it has been the most amazing experience in the world going out to do conventions, shaking people's hands, kissing babies, signing autographs, having like talking about hopes and dreams, doing interviews on podcasts, all this stuff that really was not even on my radar. And I'll tell you, I touched on it a little earlier that like, I tell my students all the time, what I think you've got to do is do the work because you love the work.
True.
And everything else will follow, or it won't. But if you love the work, it won't matter. In this case, I did this show for 12 years. Some guys, Tom, I think, has done the show now for 20 years because he did Boruto also. But those guys, they had recorded for 4 years before I got there. And then we recorded for 12 years while I was there. Now, it wasn't every day, and it wasn't even every week or sometimes even every month. You'd do a bunch of episodes, and then 3 months would go by, and I'd always be sure, like, I guess that was it. But kept coming back and doing more and more and more. Video game would show up every now and then. A movie would show up every now and then. It was awesome. It was kind of the gift that kept on giving. But we weren't making very much money. I mean, I should put that out there just because it's like, it may seem like acting is a high paid thing. In some cases it is. In anime dubbing, it is not. Like, just for the record. Okay. So the people who are doing it do it because they love it. Now, 12 years after doing it, COVID happened. The show kind of finished. We finished recording the last Shippuden episode somewhere around 2019. Shortly after that, COVID happened. And it just kind of, everything just, it just sort of went away. Now, I was doing other stuff. I've done a lot of other stuff, but Naruto went away because I figured we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And then this thing, it dropped again on Netflix, and all of a sudden it just was like, it is like front and center for me. And I'm doing, I go to probably 2 conventions a month, and I do appearances and podcasts and things like that all the time. And it is incredible and totally unexpected and totally I don't necessarily, like, I don't feel like I deserve it. I don't feel entitled to it. I don't, like, all of that. I can confidently say I did the show for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. And now, many, many years later, there's been some payoff to that in terms of people kind of, showing some love, which feels so good. It feels so, so good. And I don't know if it would have been like that if we had been famous, for doing the show while we were doing the show. I don't know what would have happened. I'd like to think we could have handled it, but I'm telling you, it's even sweeter for having it happen 15 years afterwards. I mean, look at it. We're all old guys, it's like everybody on the show is like in their 40s and 50s. And, we're all, and like, Miley's a great example where it's like, she's done a million other things, but she like she does conventions almost every weekend. Miley does, that's the voice of
Naruto. Like, when you're Naruto, of course. Yeah. To me, it's so, I guess from an anime perspective, it's so like crazy to think like, you guys wouldn't know that you guys were popular, but then it's like, if you guys aren't also into anime, because that's one thing I've noticed too, that sometimes a lot of you back in the day would just kind of just did a lot of different works. It was kind of just like a job. I'm not want to necessarily say like that, but it was more or less we're doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that's
now
true. I'm sorry. You finish your thoughts. Yeah.
No, so now that the fact that y'all get the experience is kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And the thing is, it's like, again, you got to remember when we started this. So when the show started, it was like 2004. Mm-hmm. I came on in like 2007. That the internet barely existed. I mean, like, the streaming services did not exist.
I don't think the iPhone was out.
Yeah, the iPhone wasn't out. You could get anime on like through a special cable station add-on, but I didn't have it. Anime as like a phenomenon was not popular in the States yet. There were people, OG people, like hardcore anime fans, starting to emerge, but they were few and far between, and it was not the kind of popular thing that it is now. So, and as I said, like, my agent didn't even want anything to do with it when we first started, right? Because we really made so little money that the guy was like, my agent was like, honestly, it's more of a hassle for me to run this through payroll than it is. So than it's worth. So my agent didn't want anything to do with it. No one I knew was watching it. I didn't know how to watch it. It wasn't around. You didn't see, social media didn't exist. So there wasn't any sort of like indication that something was happening until I saw somebody dressed as my character for Halloween. And then I saw something on a bus stop. And then I saw a kid wearing a t-shirt, and it was like, well, something must be going on here, but I still don't know really where to get it. And then all of a sudden the sort of the perfect storm of COVID, Netflix, Hulu, and people wanting something to watch, and there being 780 episodes of it. It was like, there you go.
Boom.
So that was it.
But my next question I want to ask you is, one of the main reasons I brought you on is because I want to talk about your experience working on Naruto Shippuden. How was it playing a villain? Were you surprised by how popular the anime has gotten? And do you have any favorite moments?
Yeah. So It was so when I was hired, I only auditioned for the silly part of Toby, right? So
Okay.
I came in and I knew that it was this clownish character who wore a funny orange mask. That's all I knew. Um, and I auditioned for it and I got it. And most of my scenes were kind of clowning with Datara and being obnoxious. And so like I didn't totally get it what was going on, and I didn't and you know I we never got scripts. We only got lines. You get sort of like a spreadsheet of the lines that you're going to speak, and you just speak your lines, and that's kind of it. And you're sort of watching and sort of reading, and you're seeing moments, but you don't totally know what's going on. The director explains stuff to you, but it's all sort of like very fantastical, and so I loved doing it, and I just had no idea what it was. And then we were doing a video game, and the video games, have the story version, and so the full story is revealed.
Yep.
And the mask came off of Toby, and it was like, even though that hadn't even been me the moment before, but I was like, oh no, so I guess I'm done then, right? And they were like, yeah. And I was so bummed. The next line in the script said Tobi/Obito. And I was like kind of messing around. And I was, I just started doing this sort of darker sound. And the engineer was like, could you keep doing that? Is that a comfortable voice for you? Could you do that? And I was like, yeah. So he had me do a few lines of it, told me to take a break. I came back from the break and he was like, okay, I ran it by everybody. You're gonna play the adult Obito. And that turned out to be like another 5 years of work after that, which is like amazing, totally crazy. And also, like, almost, if you think about it too hard, it drives you nuts, because it's like, that's not how it's supposed to work. But there you go. But so I loved it so much because, again, I had wanted to be doing animation and animation. And so I had reached out. I drummed up the audition for myself by just kind of knocking on doors and, here's my demo, and can I come in and read for you if there's ever anything you need? And I got the audition. I got the gig. That was sweet. Then I was done with the gig and I made a little push and I got another gig, and that was sweet. And it was going on for a long time, and that was awesome. And then Obito became a badass, and I had never played I'd played a lot of funny characters before, but I'd never gotten to play a badass before. And so getting to do that was like, it was just so fun, because I don't look like a badass. I'm not built like a badass. I'm not really a badass. Spoiler alert, right? so getting to kind of be this, like, seriously, like, intergalactic badass was awesome. I mean, just awesome. And I think, my favorite parts are like the arc in general. I just love so much because he is so broken that he does terrible things, but then there's still part of him that exists, that he's able to understand and hear Naruto when he tells Obito that there, you can't do this. You can't take away the dark without taking away the light. Also, you have to have both. And if you don't, life isn't real, and you're ruining everything, and you're killing people, and it's wrong. And Obito is able to see that, understand it, and then atone for it, and ultimately sacrifice himself, which is the act of a hero, of a Hokage, and die having redeemed himself from doing all these dastardly things. And I just think that arc is like, oh my, it's epic, it's unbelievable. And so, that's the thing, like, getting to all of that stuff, specifics, the Kakashi fight, of course, is a super favorite. And then I do love all of that whole fight scene with the silly Toby right before he turns to Madara. All of that stuff was super fun to do too. Those are probably my two favorite moments.
That's one of my favorite scenes too, when he's fighting Team 7, and then out of nowhere he goes from joking to like
Yeah.
serious out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, now who is this? Like, this is a whole different person right now. I think that's pretty cool. One thing I do like about Obito, because he gives off like what happens when a good one of those people who are very good, nice, innocent just turns bad, when the world is just giving them too much and they just lose it. Because that's basically what he is. Because if you think about his character as a kid, from if everything went right, he would have been Naruto. He's literally the same, like everything almost the same, to the point where he's watching Naruto and he's kind of just like seeing himself within him, and he's like trying to tell him like, you can keep doing all this, but the world is still gonna keep hitting you down. It don't matter how nice and how you try to be, the world is still going to be evil. It's still going to have all this stuff like that. But the fact that Naruto was able to still take that and still was like, I'm not going to allow that to change me, and then have that to be able to actually change Obito again, to make him be like, you know what, let me see what I'm doing and actually embrace people. Because I just feel like Obito as a character, he lost the people closest to him and just gave up low-key. And I always tell you, never know, because some of those, the most innocent, quiet, nice people, like when they lose it, they can be some of the scariest people. Because you never know, man.
No, it's I agree. You know, and exactly, you know, that I hear that a lot, is like, you know, Naruto and Obito are sort of on the same path until, you know, they diverge, and it's like, you know, what could have been, should have been kind of thing. Which is why I love, though, too, that the ending, when Obito finally does die and he's sacrificing himself, and it is that like, Naruto, you better become the Hokage. You know, is that whole moment, and then he turns to dust, is like, you know, it's a good one, you know.
Yeah, because the crazy thing is when you figure out like they both have that whole aspiration of being Hokage. Like Obito was the first person that had that whole quote, so it's kind of funny to see that happen and things.
Yeah.
But for my next question is, so how did you approach the different voices for them? Like, what made you like, okay, let me make this more deeper for Obito than Tobi?
Well, so the thing is, right, I kind of have said this a little bit already, that when I came in to audition, it was for Tobi, and they played me, the Japanese actor who plays Tobi, and it was sort of clownish and, you know, and silly, and they wanted an American version of that. So I went for it, and they liked it, and I got it. Later, it was a combination of understanding that, like, I had heard the Madara voice in the Tobi mask, so I knew that there was something deep and dark in there, and I saw the Tobi Obito line, and I, you know, and it was just like, I just went deep and dark, my version of deep and dark, which again is, you know, like still sort of like an octave above where Neil gets, right, because he goes deep into the basement, but so I just went for it. And in terms of like how to do that, you know, the vocal tract and vocal work has always been something I've just been super interested in and also playful with. So, you know, doing sort of high pitched sounds, you know, what, I don't believe it, kind of up there, you know, is a thing that I've kind of messed around with a lot, and then finding a way to kind of drop into something that's much deeper and darker is also something that I kind of have played with a lot in my life, right? So my own voice sits somewhere between the two. You know, it was a matter of, they're sort of at the two extremes of my range. So I just went high for Tobi because that felt goofy and silly, and then I went deep for Obito because that felt brooding and dark, and as it turned out, it worked, you know.
Okay. Well, my next question I want to ask you is, what emotion do you find hard to portray with just your voice?
Well, you know, the thing that's interesting. So acting, it is harder to play an emotion than it is to play an action. So in other words, like if I want, it's harder for me to act sad than it is for you to make than it is for me to make you feel sorry for me, right? I want to make you feel sorry for me, or it is than it is for me to grieve, right?
Okay.
So we often say that in acting, again, as you said earlier, and you're exactly right. There's no one way to do things, but often people will tell you to play an action rather than play, because you can play a verb, but it's hard to play an adjective. That said, vocally, it is I don't know that I've thought about this in those terms, and like as far as like what's the one thing. I guess maybe like being in love, would be difficult, because it's probably a few different emotions wrapped into one. And how do you do that vocally? Because anger is pretty straightforward. Grief is pretty straightforward. Joy is pretty straightforward. But I think maybe something that's like sort of a mixture of several might be the tough one.
Okay. When I was talking about this with another voice actor, I had come to the conclusion that I always say, like, those awkward moments in movies where you have the character confessing to the other character. Those situations always make me feel kind of like, oh, okay. So I always feel like those would probably be those situations where I probably be like, I'll try it, but I don't know how convincing it'll come off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's the with a little preparation, and if you can get yourself there, I think that's the thing. It's like the director's job is to kind of give you the context so that you can come up with some imaginary circumstances that put you in the moment, in your mind, in your imagination. And then you just have to kind of get out of your own way and let it come through you. And because all those big, long speeches towards the end of Obito's life, those are emotional and difficult, but at the same time, it's so fun as an actor to get to do that stuff, because that's the stuff you train to do, and a lot of times buy the soap is not necessarily making you flex as much as you feel like you could. And so getting to do all of those things was such a total gift, just such a fun thing. And again, I'm not saying I got it right every time either. I just loved it. That's all I can tell you, is that I loved it.
All right. For my next question, I want to ask you, how did you approach voicing Jet the Hawks in the Sonic Free Riders? How was playing in that? Because you've gotten to play in anime, and also I guess this will be considered more of a cartoonish type of
Yeah, that was, that one came to me again, like that job doesn't land on Michael Yurchak's desk, and if it weren't for the fact that I did Tobi and Obito, because they recorded in the same studio, and so they asked me to audition for it. They thought, like, you've got a good voice for this, why don't you try it? And I did, and I got to do it. And so it was, he's just meant to be sort of schoolyard bully, meets spoiled brat for a slightly younger audience, and but also, like, he's the bad guy, so have fun with it. And I went for it, and again, I got it, and we're doing a lot of fun stuff with that right now, because so there's a new video game coming out this summer. Called Cross Worlds, and Jet, it's a new racing game, and Jet will be in it, and I'm with me and under him, and so that's happening. And then because of that, we've done a couple of episodes of there's a thing called Tails Tube, which is like the character of Tails has their own YouTube channel. Okay. And they've done an episode of that, and another episode of a different thing that is like they're like stills with story underneath it, also put out. So Sega's underneath all of sort of behind all of it, and they have been doing a little bit of a publicity push for that. So it's exciting to get to do it. I think there's a Funko Pop coming this summer of Jet the Hawk. So I'm psyched for that. And and obviously that franchise is just gigantic. So who knows exactly what's next? The truth is, if it becomes part of the movie, if Jet becomes part of the movie, it'll probably be played by a celebrity, not me, but it'll still help me.
Yeah, keep the character out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people wanted the actual voice actor for Shadow to play him instead of Idris Elba, but I think they just went Idris Elba because he was more famous. But
yeah,
I know,
and
and
like Keanu Reeves is in it too. Like all of everybody except for Colleen O'Shaughnessy, who plays Tails, is replaced. In these movies. That's why, and actually what's interesting about, which, again, it's like even Sonic, I mean, like Roger Craig Smith had been playing Sonic forever, and there have been a lot of Sonics over the years, but Roger Craig Smith, has been like sort of the most Sonic. And he, by the way, who is also he plays the voice of Datara as well. And so I am Toby and Datara are sort of like frenemies, and Sonic and Jet are frenemies also. So it's so I've got those two kind of roles together with Roger, which is just kind of a funny thing that we figured out at a convention. Was the first time we'd met.
I was like, yeah, we're fated to meet each other type.
Yeah, totally. But anyway, yeah, everybody gets replaced, and it's sad. It's a bummer. It's their product. They get to do whatever they want, I guess. But we all love it that Colleen got to stay with the character, and so she's the voice of Tails. She she's like is like the people's champion, so it's like, because she's on the red carpet with Jim Carrey and doing the whole thing, and it's just like, it's awesome.
Yeah, and probably actually getting paid a nice wage for actually doing that. You know what I mean? So I'm glad she's getting that opportunity. But it's crazy that everyone else that wasn't able to do that. I wonder what she was able to do to basically help her chances. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the thing is just like her portrayal of the character was so specific and special that other people trying their hand at it, it was like they just weren't buying it, and so they just did. They kept her,
I feel like it was like, you played the character so well, we can't even get a backup for you.
Yeah.
Whew. But my next question I want to ask you, because you also have done a lot of live action stuff too, is basically when I was looking through your IMDb, I seen a film called Unhitched, where you played a Prince Charming. How was that role, and how did that come about?
So that was a television show, actually, and that was a great experience, actually. So I was a friend of mine asked me if I would help out with casting on a pilot that he was working on. So the Farrelly brothers, who are these famous comedy writers, were doing a pilot, and they wanted an actor in the room to play off of the people who were auditioning, instead of just someone from the casting office, right? They wanted sort of a real actor to be in the room and act with people. And so they asked my buddy happened to be in that little crowd and asked if I wanted to do it. And I said, sure. And it was so cool. I was involved from the when they were still just creating the show, all of the casting from the very first rounds of all of the major characters, from, audition 1 to callback to producer session to studio session to network session.
Wow. Okay.
Like those are big things, and I just was with it the whole time. Finished it all up and was like, thank you so much. I learned so much about the chemistry in a room and the dynamic, and how actors sometimes lose the role before they ever even speak, and sometimes they get the role before they do much. And just like, things that work and things that don't work and so on. And it was just such an interesting insight into the world that I hadn't known before. And then the casting people were so kind, and the production, the Farrelly brothers felt like I had sort of proven myself in the room enough, and they just offered me the part. They just, they said, we're having a table read for the episode, and we want you to play Prince Charming. And so I got to do this thing, and it was just like sort of television, or not a television, like a party performer. And so I got to do a scene with Rashida Jones, and I got to ride a horse, and it was awesome. It was super awesome. And really, really fun.
We're winding down to our last 3 questions. But my next question I want to ask you is, out of all the performances you've done so far, which one do you consider your best vocally?
That's a great question. I mean, I will never not be grateful and honored to be part of the Naruto world. I mean, I don't know that I want to say what is my best, because I don't feel like that's for me to say. It's just I know that that's been the most important thing I've done for my career and for myself, and it certainly was the longest thing. Doing a job for 12 years as an actor is like unheard of. That just the opportunity to have been able to do that and be part of something that is such a sort of phenomenon as Naruto is, I'll be grateful for it forever and ever. I've done a lot of fun stuff though over the years, and there's a fun one to do in terms of challenge was I did a movie called The Christmas Chronicles. Actually, there was a Christmas Chronicles 2 also. These were Netflix movies. They're family friendly Christmas movies. Kurt Russell plays Santa Claus, and Goldie Hawn plays Mrs. Claus. So they're sort of like they're these popular things. But I play an elf in the movies, and the elves had their own language, which was created by the linguist who created the languages for Game of Thrones. So Dothraki and all those like other languages. This guy actually created a language for Elvish, and
wow.
They taught it to us. They helped us hear it and learn it and speak it and articulate it, and they created like a lexicon of all the different words that we would be using, and they had pronunciation guides and all this stuff, and we got in a room and just kind of riffed and played and did all this stuff, and in the end got to do these characters and use this language, and it was so cool. It was so cool to get to do that. Also, we did it at Disney, and we did it, it was these other actors that I was getting to work with are some of my heroes, a guy named Fred Tatasciore, who's this amazing, anybody who's listening who's a big animation or video game fan knows that guy. He's done a million things. He's like probably one of the workingest actors out there. He's, the Incredible Hulk and a million other things. But a bunch of guys that was just like, it was an honor to be in the room with them. Debbie Derryberry was in there. Lots of folks, but that was super fun to do. And, it's like, I'm not going to say what I think was my best, but that was certainly one of my faves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For my next question, I want to ask you is, do you have any advice for anybody that wants to get into voice acting? What do you think would be the best thing for them to do? Again, my advice is always going to be work for the love of the work. Mm-hmm. Get into it for the right reasons and give your time over to it because you want to, not because you think you're going to get rewarded for it in the end, because it's too cruel a business for that to be the sustainable part of it. It's got to be the love in your heart that gets you through. But I think that, it's worth taking a class. It's worth having some information about how to do it. There are some basic things that you can learn how to do quickly and easily without having to make the mistakes on the job. And it's worth learning those things. And then I also think, you at some point when you get your stuff, you need equipment, you need a demo, you need some training. When you have that stuff, say yes, do everything, put it out there. Don't get in your own way. Be nice to other people. Keep work, just work and work and work and work and work because you love doing the work, and the rest will happen. I promise. Okay. And for my last question, I want to ask you is, what ambitions or goals do you have yet to fulfill in the field of voice acting?
Ooh, that's a nice question. I I would still like to do, I'd love to have a significant role on an ongoing current animated series.
Okay.
I've done a lot of anime. I love anime, and I'd like to keep doing that. I'd like, that would count. But I would like, I'd like to do something. I'd love to have another run. Even so, I did 2 seasons of Rising Impact. I did 2 seasons of TP Bond. I've done lots of other work. Stuff happens very quickly. We did a season in 2 sessions. So it's like that's a lot of work that happens fast. I would like to do something that has a little bit, slower trickle, so that I could kind of build a little bit of a groove. I'm on a show right now called My Adventures with Superman, which is on Adult Swim and HBO Max. But I've done sort of like 2 episodes over 3 seasons. Theoretically, I should be coming back at some point. I'm not sure when. I would love that kind of a thing to turn into something that became like a regular,
like a recurring character. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are things for sure that I'd love.
For sure. That would sound dope to be able to get another role that you can play for another like 10, 15 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I will say, just with the recent anime that I've seen coming out, it doesn't seem like anime are pushing that many episodes like that before. Because, if I'm thinking about it, because you just got Demon Slayer that's about to end, My Hero's about to end. I think Jujutsu Kaisen's getting close to ending. So it's like a lot of these shows, like now in this generation, are trying to end. Where you still got shows from later generations, like One Piece, still going on. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
You talk about roles that you could get and play those forever. Just imagine if you could have got into One Piece as one of the Straw Hats. I mean,
yeah,
they've been doing that for almost 20 years. So like,
yeah,
wow,
yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, is there any other topics you want to talk about, or you got a question for me or anything?
No, it's been a real pleasure. You're a great interviewer. It's fun to kind of have good conversation, this has been really fun. So thank you so much for having me, and good luck with everything. What happens with this? What do you do with it? Where do you put it?
I usually put it on YouTube, and it usually takes me about a month to a month and a half because I have a few episodes I still got to edit before this one to put out and stuff like that. And then I will send you an email basically when I put it out, so you can share it on your social media and stuff, and you can check it out yourself and see if you like it and everything. So
nice. All right, well, great. Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate you.
And with that, we end today's episode. I want to thank my guests for coming on and chatting it up with me. I had a lot of fun and learned so much more about the industry of voice acting, and hopefully you listeners did too. Before we close out, I just want to allow my guest the opportunity to plug himself, basically tell the audience where they can find you.
At Michael Yurchak on Instagram, MICHAELYURCHAK. That's probably the best one. There's also Tobi Voice on TikTok, but I'm less active there these days.
All right. And with that, I just want to say peace. And also, I will post his links and everything below. So if you guys want to ask him any questions or anything, they'll be right there. Peace.
Thank you guys.